Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Boardroom. Today, we're joined by a leader whose career has redefined what transformation looks like across different industries. Daniel Heaf has helped shape digital innovation at the BBC, repositioned Burberry as a global leader in modern luxury, and scaled Nike's direct business to $22 billion while managing people from across 41 different countries. He now serves as the Chief Executive Officer at Bath and Bodyworks, one of the world's most emotionally resonant and resilient brands. Now, what makes his journey extraordinary isn't just the massive impact he has had in each one of these roles, but it is the fact that he has a career built on innovation, transformation, and a true understanding of how brands are able to connect with their customers. Daniel, it is such an honor to have you here today. Thank you so much for joining in.
It's wonderful to be here, and I just got to start by correcting your wonderful introduction. As flattering as it is, it always makes me feel slightly uneasy because, of course, I had the pleasure of working for some of those incredible brands, but nothing I did. It was all about the teams. It was all about the leaders, and it was all about working together with other people that allowed us to achieve those great milestones. It makes it sound like I was the person that single-handedly managed to do all of those things, and it couldn't be further from the truth. So I would get slightly. I'm always slightly find those descriptions slightly odd.
No, it's okay. I completely understand that, and of course, yeah, every accomplishment, there's always many people involved, right? So it's great that you're able to kind of highlight the contributions of other people. So Daniel, I want to just go ahead and jump right into it. Now, of course, being the CEO of such a large company, I kind of just want to understand from the perspective of a CEO, right? A lot of people are able to kind of hear this on a day-to-day basis. So when you're pivoting to a different company or when you're pivoting to a different role, what was and you saw that the company had entered a specific inflection point and you had certain things that you needed to tackle. What was the kind of things that you're able to do to gauge where the company was at and figure out what exactly it is that needed to be changed whenever you're entering inside of a new company?
Well, I think it's twofold. When you come into inside a company, you do have to spend an awful lot of time really listening. I always think, certainly in the first 6 months, I counsel myself every night to say less and listen more, because it doesn't matter how many consumer companies you've worked at, how many consumer transformations you've done. Every company is different. Every company has a different company culture. Every company has a different way of doing things. And to come in and think that you know it is not only disrespectful to the team, but also not true. So you come in and you listen. Now, the flip side to that coin is whether it was BBC or Burberry or Nike, you've had the pleasure of being part of a team that's been through some pretty holistic consumer-led transformations. You've learned over the time from pattern recognition, some of the things that you've been part of that were very successful, some of those things that weren't successful, and some lessons along the way. And so you do get to put all those pieces of experience together when you go to a new company to chart a better path.
No, that's great. And I think just that kind of like blend of experiences is something that can always contribute to a very unique perspective when you're kind of bringing about that change. So I think it's pretty unique how you're able to have work with so many different kinds of industries, right? And that kind of brings me to the next question. So you've pivoted through so many different industries across media, luxury fashion, sportswear, tech, and of course now kind of beauty and consumer products. So I kind of want to ask you, what's that single transferable skill that you've seen really been able to help you accelerate throughout all these roles?
I would say it's really being consumer focused, consumer orientated. All the answers to the difficult business problems that are asked are all out there with the consumer. And if you're looking in the right place, you can see what the consumer is doing today. And if you look in the right place, you can see where the consumer is going. And shaping your organization to listen to those trends and react to them truthfully is It is the lifeblood of these types of transformations. And I think it doesn't really matter whether it's sneakers or whether it's body care or whether it's luxury apparel. Ultimately, your understanding of the consumer is the biggest differentiator between success and failure.
No, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think that's one of the things that I really respect the most about your work is just how consumer centric you are and always open to, kind of getting that feedback regarding how consumers are operating. So I think that's a very important thing to have whenever you're considering bringing about transformation in a company.
I think and then people will always ask you, well, what do you mean by consumer insights? And there's two types of consumer insights, and both are important. But yeah, when you're the CEO of a company, you can get access to all this information from teams, from analysts, and you can sit and read and read and read and read and read and read. And I do. And I love that part of that desk job. But what I love more is being with actual consumers. So, at Nike, I've always been a passionate runner, and I would spend hours and hours and hours in running shops, in small running doors around North America, in run clubs, on trails, at track meets, talking to runners. And at Bath and Bodyworks, I spend every weekend in malls, talking to our consumers, also talking to actual consumers in our competitors' stores. I've sort of got over my own inhibition to just go up to people in the street and talk to them. And I find those things and talking to store associates, that is the lifeblood. I go into every competitor's store and I'm saying, and my first question is, "Hi, what's your top selling thing this week?" Right? Like I love that,
Mhm.
like actual knowledge on the ground, watching consumers, and being part of their world.
No, I think that's super awesome. Just being able to kind of interact with people on such a personal level, kind of get that information out of them. I think there's always a lot of benefit that can be derived from that. So, kind of just going into a little bit towards the student side, right? So, pretty much everything early on is kind of a mindset thing, how students are able to approach the workforce. And so, a lot of times people talk about skills that people need to learn, but just curious from your perspective, what have you seen students, whether it was a mindset or whether it was a kind of skill that students have that they need to kind of unlearn or maybe kind of rethink on how they're approaching something, a certain problem, so or a certain idea. So a lot of times, people talking about you should learn this, but what's something that young analysts or young associates might need to unlearn before entering a certain role?
I'm sure everyone's different and every career path is different, and I would never advocate for anyone to take any advice from my journey. I even tell my own kids that I'm not a good example to be followed. But I do think one of the things that I look for in all people in the professional world is, if you ever think that you're done learning, then I think we have a big problem,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I would hate for people to think that they're leaving college or they're leaving school and they've learned some skills. Your learning journey, you need to be a lifelong learner, and lifelong learners, in my opinion, make the most successful employees of all time. Um, if you have a passion for learning, and it's not learning because you feel like you have to learn to pass a test or get a qualification, but if you learn because of the passion for learning, I actually think that's an enormous competitive advantage.
Absolutely, I think so as well. And so, kind of on like that learning, that same general idea of learning, right? So, when students are entering a first job, they're oftentimes scared if they should kind of just go and first diversify all their experiences or, kind of just stick to a certain path and go ahead and specialize in it. So, what would you say? Of course, everyone has a different path, but is there a kind of like a general rule that you'd like to tell people, like, hey, this is, you should kind of explore at least in this, an X amount of years of your early career and then kind of go and specialize a little bit later on?
Well, this is exactly what I meant by advice. So I'll tell you how I think about it, but I already tell my own children not to do this. So um, my advice to myself, and my parents gave me this advice, was to never think about your career and never think about the next move, and only follow your heart and your passions, because you'll be spending an awful lot of time doing work. And if you don't find it something that you truly you don't want to wake up every morning and you want to spring in your step and you want to jump out of bed and you want to go, I want to get to work because I'm excited to get there. That is way more important than doing a job to get to something that you think that you might want.
Mhm.
And so my whole life and every decision that I've made about my career has been about following my passions. And so I didn't think about specializing or or staying diverse. I thought about following my passion. Now it just so happens that my passions are very diverse. I think the innovation that I've helped drive at companies comes from putting ideas, building on other people's ideas from multiple sectors. So at the BBC, it was my love of technology and understanding of technology and my love of music and radio. And at Burberry, it was my love of British design and fashion and retail and digital technology. So I think the way that you create new, the way that you innovate isn't by like sitting down and thinking about what's innovative. It's about having a diverse set of experiences or learning lots of things about lots of things and putting them together in an interesting way.
Of course. And I think, kind of going back to the part about managing people. So we kind of discussed this a lot, but whenever you're going through this whole process of managing people, right, especially from the perspective of someone so high up in a company, what do you say is going to be the thing that you try to put an emphasis on that you think is something that contributes to people wanting to stay at your company, whether that be in terms of, I don't know, benefits or culture. Just curious to see from your perspective, what has really drawn a lot of employees to stay at the different companies that you've been at and really have that extra piece of motivation?
It's really simple. My view on this is very simple. Everyone wants to be on a winning team. You go and ask people about what their highlights of their career. I have these wonderful mentors, former CEOs, luminaries in business who all advise me. And if I ever ask them what it was the best time of their careers, they don't talk to me about the stock price and they don't talk to me about like the innovation or whatever it is they have to do. They talk to me about, do you remember when it was me, you, and this guy? And do you remember the late nights that we had and the things that we did? And then we launched it. It's all about being on a winning team. And so the way I talk to people about what's important is business is a team sport. And so building high performance teams is essentially the job of a leader or a chief executive. And secondly, winning. Winning is fun. I had a friend at Nike who always told me that surfing the wave is much more fun than trying to catch the wave. And I think that, ultimately that's what we're aspiring to do, create winning teams.
Absolutely. And I think I would love to get that perspective, right? So, can you talk us through some of those winning moments inside of your own career, or maybe some challenges even that were able to really help you learn something or teach you something that you thought you wouldn't have had learned without that experience?
Yeah, I'll teach you about the good and the bad. Maybe I'll mention two examples. So the bad was, I think that when I was at the BBC, I was very young. I was a very early manager, and the English school system didn't bring you up to be a very team orientated person. It was, you do exams, you're competing with everybody else, and sort of you're like a lone wolf. It's quite lone wolf culture, and that doesn't work. And even though I had a very clear vision, I wasn't good at leading people. I used the team as a tool to get the vision done, as opposed to create a vision collaboratively and implement it together. And ultimately, it doesn't matter whether your strategy is right or wrong. If you don't genuinely co-author your strategy and vision together, and if people are not fully bought in to the direction, you're not going to implement successfully, or you might implement successfully, but the change won't last. So at Nike, we worked on the vision for the direct-to-consumer business together with a great team, and it was so much fun building that vision together, and even more fun implementing it together and watching it be successful.
Uh-huh.
And it was the difference of those two approaches, I think, was one of the biggest learnings in my career, personally for me too.
No, that's amazing. And for all the viewers watching, Daniel actually helped kind of reshape the entire sneakers app too. So I know that a lot of people can resonate with that. I myself was a huge shoe enthusiast back in the day. Used to kind of spawn the sneaker drops too. So it was a pretty cool part being able to learn that about Daniel as well. Now, I kind of
That
want
was fun.
yeah, absolutely. And so I kind of want to also ask you, what's the best thing that students can do nowadays to really help position themselves in a way that would drive the most amount of success? Whether that be, just getting more familiar with technology, kind of helping develop those soft skills. What would you say is going to be something important to focus on?
I think you've hit the nail on the head, Mustafa. I would say, what are the skills that you can learn now that people who are 10 years older than you are just not going to know as much about or as intuitively as you? So
Hmm.
my competitive advantage as a 20-year-old in the workforce was I was obsessed by the early internet, and I knew how it worked, and I knew how to build websites, and I understood how technology was put together. And as a result, even though other people could talk about the internet because they'd read a book or whatnot, I lived that culture and I understood it deeply as a practitioner. Today, there is a lot of executives who have read a book about AI, but do you know every tool and can you use it? And have you really thought about how it works? And can you build your own LLMs? And do you really understand the blockchain and how that can be used and what its potential uses are for? And have you actually deployed it in some way?
Hmm.
These are things, these types of things are things that you can learn and things that you can do early on in your career. And no one else, like it was when I remember someone once asked me at a job interview when I was young, they wanted 20 years e-commerce experience. And I said to them, that's ridiculous because I've been doing e-commerce as long as there's been e-commerce and I haven't got 20 years experience. I'm the most experienced e-commerce person you can have just by the fact that I started at the same time as it started.
Hmm.
Yeah, and everybody who's young at the beginning of their career can make this a competitive advantage for themselves. You know, when someone turns around and say, in 5 years' time, your experience with AI, you should better write that you you have done X, Y, and Z, and no one else should better touch you because no one else was there at the beginning, and no one else got to deploy it to quite the levels that you guys did. That's how I would think about it.
Absolutely. And so when you're thinking about all these different technologies, right, that are really changing the entire industries, how are you able to go about first trying to learn it for yourself, but then also go about teaching it to other people and thinking of ways you can implement it inside of the company that you're at?
Well, I'm a big believer in I'm a big believer in personally. I use all these tools and technologies myself.
Yeah.
So I don't read a book about it. I'm like, all right, cool. So I set myself projects, which is I wonder what the future store of Bath and Body Works would look like. Now I could ask the store teams to go and do that for me, or I'm gonna give myself some time at the weekend and I'm gonna spend 12 hours in AI tools building renders of the future of stores. Not because that is the future of our store, because there are people and teams who are way better at that than me,
Yeah.
but by giving myself something to think about that I should be thinking about and doing it in a new way, you create a kind of mini project and objective for yourself. Just sitting there in front of ChatGPT with an Ask Anything box, if you haven't got a purpose, it's really hard to try to get the tool to do things. It's really hard to test it
For sure.
in
Yeah.
the way that you need to. So I always, set myself projects, set myself like I've got to do, I don't know, I've got to write a board report. I have to write it. Now, I know what a good board report is. I wonder if I can get ChatGPT to write it. oh no, it doesn't write it that well. Like, well, how would I rewrite that prompt to make it better? Oh, well, that's better, but still not quite right. Well, what would I change about that, and how could I get it to learn? Well, maybe I'll change the personalization settings so it's got a bit more context. So I sort of give myself
Mm,
projects that I would do anyway and use tools to try to make it work. Um, and then I think for teams inside companies, giving people access to tools. Yeah, I think that's give people access to tools and let them let them there's obviously a training element to it, but I also think I'm a big believer in just tinkering. My whole life I learned really through
yeah.
tinkering, right? That's sort of where I started. I built my first PC when I was 15, not because there was a book or because the internet was there, but I figured it out by plugging different bits into different pieces and working out if it switched on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Practice what you preach, right? That's what it is at the end of the day. You have to be able to kind of work with the tools that you're pushing out to different employees. So I think it's a great thing to see that in action. Now, Daniel, going back early into your career, do you ever remember that a specific word of advice that someone told you that really resonated with you and kind of stuck throughout your entire career?
Yeah, I go back to the advice I talked to about what it
Hmm.
feels like to be what are the greatest moments of your career, and the win as a team
Yeah.
is the advice I go back to every day. Business is a team sport, and you need the whole team to be performing offense, defense. Everyone has a role to play. You have a role to play as whether you're your individual role on the field, and then you have a role to play as part of the team. And so to me, that is the that's my leadership mantra, really, I would say.
For sure. No, that's great. And once this chapter at Bath and Body Works closes, Daniel, what do you want people to remember you the most by when this is all said and done?
I want people to think he helped build winning teams. I had great fun being on the team, and I achieved more than I ever thought I could in my career, personally and professionally, because of the team that we were.
Amazing. I love to hear that. Everyone, this has been a phenomenal conversation with the Chief Executive Officer at Bath and Body Works. Daniel, thank you so much for your time today. It was an amazing conversation and super excited to have you here today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for the conversation. I enjoyed it enormously.
Absolutely, Daniel. Thank you.